So you were just saying how as soon as you use it for your own sake type thing, then it's no longer love. And you were just wrapping up that thought.
Yeah, it's you cannot manipulate love because the moment it's not for the right reason, it's no longer love. So, if I love you so that you will love me, I'm not really loving you, I'm loving me.
Okay. Can I ask one more question about that?
Yes.
And then we'll wrap up. And this is something that I thought of ever since the first time I heard you um talking about what love really is. And I thought to myself, like, does that mean that basically 99% of the world genuinely does not know what love is? And when they say that they love someone, they are unknowingly lying. Not to bash them and say, oh, you're lying because they're not aware. But is that really true? Because if that's the case, well, then I'm guilty of that. And I think everybody's guilty of that for their whole life until they realize this truth. And that's pretty significant.
Yeah, no, it's enormously significant. Um, it's kind of like you said, but I would suggest a little different. I think no one is perfect. Obviously, no one is perfectly loving,
Hmm.
um, and most people aren't perfectly selfish. But we're going one direction or another at all times. In other words, and our relationship is as well. We're either becoming more loving, meaning that I'm doing some of the things I do for you are not really for you; they're for me. Um, but but whenever that hurts you or when I realize it, I regret it,
Right.
and
So it's like a
I change.
mix.
Yeah, that's right. That's
Okay.
exactly right. So
That makes
I'm
more
either
sense.
yeah, I'm either becoming more and more loving. Love is always either growing or dying. It's never stagnant.
Oh my
Okay,
gosh. Wow, that's
it's
cool because
growing.
that's a defining factor of a life.
Yeah, that's right.
That's
That's right.
interesting.
Well, it's always going because hurt is always coming. Right. So the greatest opportunity we ever have to love is when hurt comes up. If it doesn't cost me anything to do something for you, I'm not sure if that's love. It's like, I mean, it's like, if I do for you and you do for me, and we're both happy that we got what we wanted, that's not love at all. Love is sacrifice. So it's, that you're loved whenever it cost me something and I expected nothing in return. And,
Hmm.
but in life, we do both. Like in my relationship with my wife, sometimes I'm doing things it's not really love. You know what I mean? uh, I'd say I love my wife and I'm saying I'm loving her, but I'm not really loving her. And she knows that. She knows when that's happening. And some of those things are not so, they're kind of trivial. It's not, those are truths that are not worth fighting for, that they aren't life changing. It's nothing really significant.
Right. And wouldn't you say that's maybe sort of like a neutral thing? Because like my thought is, well, realistically, is there anything wrong with doing something that's good for both you and your partner, for example, where you don't really need to sacrifice, but you both benefit? Like, is there really anything wrong with that? Or is that sort of like a gray neutral area where it just sort of is what it is?
Maybe if that was really the case, there wouldn't be anything wrong with that, but I don't think that's possible. In other words,
That's interesting. Right now, according to my current perspective, this is the first thing that I've maybe disagreed on. But I'm
okay,
open because
let's do this. Let's do this. Do you have an example of a situation where you believe that what you're doing is equally good for you and for someone else, assuming that everything costs something. But just I don't know. What's an example? Let's just have an example. What's an example of um,
so I
what you're
think
talking about?
I might get
Or do you have?
exposed. I might get exposed here if Well, I'll say what I'm thinking, and if I get exposed and I'm wrong, that's okay, and I'm open to changing my perspective. But my
Yeah, but
thought is like,
hey, I might get exposed too. Okay.
oh, this
So
is true.
yeah, that's okay. I mean, our
Yeah,
goal is truth. Our goal is truth. Yeah.
yeah. So, like, the first thing that I think about is doing a favor for my girlfriend that she appreciates, that makes her feel loved, that is also convenient to me. So, in other words, there's the example where you can do something for a loved one that is sacrificial when where you need to like go out of your way, and that is generally more appreciated by the other person because they say, "Oh my gosh, you put in all this effort, like that makes me feel extra loved." And then there's the things that are so trivial that really take no effort at all, and they're convenient to you, and I guess they could maybe be good to for the other person, but because of how little effort went into it, it doesn't really make them feel loved. I'm sure I'm talking in the context of relationship, but my thought is like, if I have something that I can give and that I can afford to lose, and I give it to someone to help them, couldn't that still be under the umbrella of love, right?
Okay. So all right. Well, let's see. Let's just ask a question real quick. Why do you want her to feel loved?
Okay.
Is your goal to make her feel loved, or is your goal to love her?
Whoa. Is my goal to make her feel loved?
All right. And all right, I'm gonna take
Okay,
it a step further.
sure. Can I
If
just
you're
answer it real quickly?
Yeah, please.
That part?
Yeah. Yeah.
I think depending on the situation, it fluctuates because there's some things where I'm like, it's more so I want her to feel loved, um, which is more about like it's not as maybe not quite as deep. It's just like I want to do this favor so that she can feel loved, so that we can have a good night, let's say, for example, so that there's no conflict or whatever. And maybe that's even reaching a bit far, but then there's definitely like many cases where I will do something because I genuinely care for the soul of my girlfriend and I want to do what's best for her. And there have been times where I hurt her, and sometimes I realize later that the way that I did it wasn't good, but my intention was genuine love, but the way that I expressed it wasn't good, or maybe the way she received it wasn't good. Um, yeah, I think it fluctuates depending on the circumstances, depending on the day, depending on the situation.
Okay. Well, here's where you need to be careful. If our goal, and I don't think there's anything wrong with doing little things. I don't think little things are really that little at all. I think the little things are often the big things.
Yeah.
So, I mean, if I have something small that really doesn't cost me much, and I give it to you, if I'm giving it to you for you, and out of pureness, even though it's not costing me a lot, it may not be a big love, but I would think that that's still love. But
Mhm.
if I'm using something small that I don't need to make you feel loved by me, why am I doing that? And if I'm
Right.
doing that just so you know that I love you, then I think that's love, right? But if where we got to really be careful is if we get in the business of trying to make people feel loved compared to actually loving them, then then we get in the business of pleasing people, and pleasing people is very selfish. It's
I
because the
literally
reason I
felt like
want
knots in my stomach when you said that because of like I feel the truth in what you're saying.
because when we're pleasing people, it's almost never for them. It's for us. We want them to be pleased with us, or we want them to be pleased so we can relax. We want them to be pleased because we don't want to deal with actually loving them, because actually loving them
Whoa.
may be unpleasing. So
Whoa. 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 Whoa.
yeah,
Whoa.
when we
I was
really
not
love
ready
please,
for that.
Yeah. So when we really love people, if I really love my wife, I mean, I do desire that she's happy. You know what I mean? Like nothing makes me happier than her being happy. Nothing gives me more joy than seeing my wife pleased, and just
Right.
all of those things. But the trap in that is that I start doing things to please her. And I'm really, although I enjoy seeing her pleased, me enjoying it is for me, not for her. And as soon as this starts becoming about for me, then I'm unwilling to actually love her, because when she is hurt, I'm hurt. Whenever it's unpleasing, it costs me something. I'm going to be unpleased. So I start pleasing her at all costs, and I'm no longer loving her. And what happens when we do that is the person we're always pleasing knows they're not loved. We know it whenever
Oh
people
my
love it and when they don't know
God.
it. Right. And so then we get to this place where it's like, I do all of these things to love you, what we should say, to please you. But you say, I don't
Oh,
love you. And they don't, sometimes we're not really thinking about everything that's going on here. But what they're saying is, I don't feel loved. And the reason they're saying they don't feel loved sometimes, not always, but sometimes because we're not loving them. And that's when it goes back to what we talked about before, where if you ask me if I love my wife, um, I would say I love her with all my heart. But then what I've learned since is that if I tell you I love my wife, what I'm really saying is that my wife loves me, which means my wife is choosing to do what's best for me without regard for herself. When she does that, that's when I want to say I love her. And just give you a quick example. Um, if two guys, or if a guy's in trouble, or a girl, whatever, somebody's in dire straits, their life's on the line, whatever
mhm.
circumstance, situation it is. Somebody comes along and they see them, and then they risk their life to save this person. Okay. So let's just say you risked your life to save me. You didn't know me, nothing else, but you risked your life. You saved me. We're done with that. We stand up, we look at each other. What I want to say is, man, I don't know you, but I love you. But the truth is, you just loved me. I'm saying I love you because you loved me. You are the one who did what was best for me without regard for yourself. I didn't love you, you loved me. But I'm the one saying I love you. So in relationships, if we aren't, but we got to be, if we can ever understand this,
Whoa.
we're always looking for the I love you, but we're not understanding that the I love you is the fruit of the loving. And the loving is the sacrifice. It's the willingness to do what's best for someone else. We don't ever get this perfect, Chris, but in every relationship, the two people in the relationship have made up their mind. Oh, they've already made up their mind, at least for now. They can change their mind, but they've made up their mind, at least for now, who comes first. And if one of the two in their minds, I come first, if I come first, then I'm going to please you. I'm not going to love you.
Hmm.
And then you're going to not feel loved. And then I'm not going to understand why you don't feel loved, because I do all these things to please you, not to love you. But if I really love you, then I do what's best for you, even when it's unpleasing. And that's whenever you start realizing, wow, this person really loves me. You know what I mean? They're not telling me what they know I want to hear. They're telling me what they believe is best for me. And that's whenever, so then when you have two people who are willing to love each other, put the other one first, they'll fail to do it frequently, but they'll repent when they fail to do it. And each time they get hurt and they love through the hurt, the love grows stronger in their relationship. And the hurt keeps coming. And then they keep loving each other through that hurt. And the love keeps growing stronger. So the more hurt we love through, the stronger love grows in our life. But if at any point in time we decide we're not loving through this hurt, this
Hmm.
one is unforgivable, or whatever it is, and any one of the people say, you know what, from here forward, it's me first, then the love starts dying. And so the love is the decision, the choice, and it's the why behind what we did. And then the very nature of that, the natural fruit of that we never have to create is the I love you. You know, that's that feeling that comes from the decision. But our problem is, my problem most of my life was I thought that the feeling was the love. So I fought for
Yeah.
the feeling, which meant I pleased
Well,
you.
you're not alone. Like that's literally the entire world. That is literally
Right.
everybody except for a handful of humans, probably, which
Yeah.
is incredibly sad, but that just puts this burning fire in me to like, yo, like we gotta share this. Um,
Yeah.
and most of the
And
world, like,
go ahead.
yeah, just quickly, you said when we love through the hurt, we grow in love. What most people do and what I see and why there's so many, insecure and afraid and man, that we can get into a whole other realm of relationships and false relationships and fake relationships and all this type of stuff. Um, in those cases, it's pleasing to avoid the hurt. And then when the hurt comes, it's trying to mask with pleasing. So, oh, well, maybe if I can make them feel pleased in the midst of this, then the hurt will go away instead of loving and accepting that hurt is a reality. And this ties back to trying to control.
Yeah. And that's exactly right. Well said. And it's the pleasing that kills the love.
That's so, you said the whole counterintuitive thing. You are absolutely right. Because that, like, on the surface makes no sense. But as soon as you think about it, then you have to ask the question, well, why are you pleasing? And then when you get to the root of that, you realize that it's not out of love. And so, in other words, you are living out, like, obviously it's to varying degrees because there could be a messiness in the context of with which you express this, but you're essentially living out a lie by pleasing instead of loving. That person recognizes it. You build this emotional connection over an extended period of time. You get dependent, committed to this person, and then you realize that the foundation wasn't really as solid as you thought it was. And then the thing you said about your skiing thing, where you came to the end of yourself and you became undone, I think that's where you come undone in the context of your relationship, is when you reach the end of yourself of what you can possibly do for pleasing the person and there's hurt. That's when people break off and they're like, I can't do this anymore. I need to focus on me.
Yeah.
And that's the whole
And yeah,
individualism, whatever.
right. But the problem, you're going in a whole different direction. But I can go off on that one. But the whole problem is they do what you just said. I can't handle that anymore. I'm just going to focus on me. Well, what I would say is, no, 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 no. You've been focused on me the whole time. That's the problem. I mean, that's why you're pleasing people.
Wait, wait,
You're not
wait. Sorry,
pleasing
say
them
that.
for them.
Wait, say that again. Say that again. Oh, so you're saying that
So,
if I change, like I or someone, whatever, right? Um, change their perspective once they hit that level of hurt and they go, "Oh, I'm going to focus on me now." What you're saying is, well, that's not a change at all because that's what you've been doing the whole time already.
that's exactly right.
Okay.
So, all right. So you have to think about this. All right. And this one gets me in hot water sometimes, but this is the truth. People pleasing, the way the world of psychology and everyone approaches people pleasing is they come to these people and they say, the problem is you don't love yourself. And so you need to focus more on yourself because you feel insecure. So that's why you're pleasing these people all the time, so that so that they'll make you feel secure. That's the codependency they call it. And this people
Right.
pleasing just mean it, but the inherent nature of people pleasing is not love, it's selfishness, it's self-focused. It's not that there's anything wrong with doing something for someone that actually results in pleasing them. There's nothing wrong with that. It's why we're doing it that makes it wrong.
Okay.
So
And
if
can I say
I'm,
something about that real quick? Just before I
yeah,
forget? I'm sorry to interrupt you. I'm sorry to cut you off.
no, you're fine.
Just to simplify it even more. So if people pleasing is selfishness, and then we dive deeper into selfishness, selfishness is trying to control or manipulate for what you want. And if you think that you have the ability to do that and you view yourself on that level and you believe that you're that important, what is that? That is pride. And pride comes before the fall, and pride is essentially the father of all sins. And like if you like fear slash pride is like
Yeah. And
the
that
simplest
goes,
version to express that.
yeah. And that goes both ways. Okay. And here's what I'm going to say. Um, Most people who please people don't please people because they think so highly of themselves. They please people because they think so lowly of themselves. But they don't realize. So in other words, it's people who would tell you that they hate themselves are the ones that please people all the time because they say, I don't feel worthy of whatever it is, whatever. That's why they please all these people. But whether you hate yourself or you so-called love yourself, in either case, you're obsessed with yourself. That is
Yes.
the problem. That is the
Right.
problem. So modern psychology will say, hey, if people don't please them, people that please other people need to learn how to love themselves. But the truth is, no, they don't. They're fabulous at loving themselves. That's their whole problem is they're loving themselves. They're not loving anyone around them. Everything they do
Whoa. That's
for
so
the people
trippy.
around them. It's not for the people around them. It's for themselves. That's what's wrecked them. That's what's undoing all their relationships. Like, in other
Whoa.
words, yeah. So in other words, I don't let my wife abuse me in any way, shape, form, or fashion for my wife's sake. I wouldn't do that. I mean, that would never be for her sake. So why would I ever allow her to? Because I'm afraid of something I'm going to lose. Now, this is assuming I have the power to
Yes.
escape.
Whoa. That was
Okay.
so well put. Thank you.
Yeah,
Wow.
assuming I have the power to escape. But so if we don't, that's a whole different ballgame. But in most cases, we do. So the reason we stay through all of this is because we love ourselves already. And what we need to learn how to do is actually to love and to go, you know what? It's not best for you to abuse anyone in any way, shape, form, or fashion. So even though it's unpleasing to you for me to tell you that and to no longer participate in that, because I
Mm-hmm.
love you, I
Mm-hmm.
can't. I can't. If I love you, I cannot volunteer for your selfish missions. And if I do, I'm no longer loving you. I'm loving me. So
Wow. So in
we
other
need to
words,
learn
to
to
kind
love
of,
people, pleasing or not. Go
yeah,
ahead.
so to rephrase to try to get more clarity for me. So if somebody who maybe like doesn't really respect themselves, let's say, um, goes out of their way to do stuff for other people
For approval.
for approval and to maybe, let's say, to serve that other person's selfish pleasure so that they can feel validation, then they're not
Right.
really loving the person and their people pleasing is really empty because they're just doing it to get something for themselves. And in doing that, they're also serving the other person's selfish pleasure, which is
That's
feeding a lie to that
right.
other person.
That's right. They're using the person they love for themselves. They're loving themselves. That's what they're doing. Loving someone is doing what's best for the other person without regard for yourself. Loving yourself is doing what's best for yourself without regard for the other
And that's
person.
exactly what that is it's loving yourself without regard for the other person. And it's actually not loving yourself for regard for the with no regard for the other person. It's not loving yourself for no regard for you or the other person. And that's what today's world is. Oh, I love myself. But in reality, you're not loving yourself and you're not loving the other person because if you wanted to, if you
Yeah.
were actually
Well,
to love them, you would do what's best for you and for them. And neither, and to serve their selfish pleasure to get what you want is not doing either of those things. It's not loving to them or loving to you.
yeah. If
Truly,
you,
in its true sense.
yeah. Well, you put someone first. So if you love yourself, then you're going to please people, period. Or if you don't please them, whatever you do whatever you do in your relationships with other people is going to be for your sake, not for their sake. If
And
what
you
you
can do
do
a
is
great
truly
job
for
to
their
mask
sake,
that.
huh?
And you can do a great job to mask that.
Oh yeah, right.
I'm
But
sorry,
it
I
doesn't
interrupted
matter
you.
how much you mask it. It doesn't matter if you sell the lie. None of that matters. In the end, it's not love, and it will be the truth reveals itself, and
Yeah,
it can't work. It will not work. It will
yeah.
never work. There's only one thing that works, and that's love. And sometimes love costs us something, but it never costs us more than not loving is going to cost us. So we got to be willing to love, pleasing or not.
I'm like starting to wonder, does anybody like have you ever run into anybody else that is aware of this?
Man, it's just crazy to say, but unfortunately, I don't talk to many people that I don't see anybody. Probably the person I see closest to um, getting close to what truth is, which if we really find real truth, it leads to love.
Yeah.
The truth leads to love.
Well,
Okay,
because God is love and God is the truth.
that's exactly right. So probably the person the closest I see to that is Jordan Peterson, but
Right.
he
I would
doesn't.
agree.
I would humbly say, as humbly as I can say it, because I'm Kenny Vaughan, who am I to be saying? But he doesn't fully understand love. I don't think. When he talks about becoming a monster, and and that when he gets off into how if what is you remember what he says, that he has a
Yeah.
certain line all the time
Yeah,
about
and
monster.
I would actually I would okay, I've never looked at it through the perspective of what you've said, but for like just without like by default, I would sort of defend what I've heard him say, which is basically as a man, generally it's for anybody, but generally as a man, uh
Mhm.
it's not there's no integrity or anything to be admired for being weak and being harmless. What he says is you need to be a monster, not in the sense of like be, a monster and be vicious, but have the capacity to, the way he describes it, if I'm not mistaken, is have the capacity to do evil or have the capacity to inflict harm, but then sheath that capacity the same way that somebody who is a black belt in karate would learn it so that they don't have to use it
Right.
because that can establish, you know, respect and order and and
Yep.
sort of those things that are generally paralleled with and synonymous with masculinity.
Yeah.
And
But hey, let me just stop you real quick
sure,
before we get too far on that. All of that's manipulation. And if you think you can harness, if you think you can reserve a monster within and harness it, I got bad news for you, man. The monster's coming out, and you're not going to choose when it comes out.
I would
And
actually, okay,
all right, let me finish real quick.
sure, sure.
The weakest of all men are monsters. Monsters are not strong. They're weak. Now, I'm not suggesting what is strong is love. Love is strong. I am not suggesting that love will not fight or that love will not take a stand. Obviously, it will.
Right.
There's nothing more unmovable from the truth than love. But love never becomes a monster, ever.
Okay, I would argue that I think maybe the term monster is maybe a an
Well,
unnecessary trigger word that maybe you're clinging on to more than he
no,
is intended to.
I thought that at first. At first, I thought, what, he means something different, because the bottom line is, what does he mean? I would love to have this conversation with
Oh
him
my
one day.
gosh, I
I,
would love
I
to
would
talk
like
to
to ask
Jordan
him.
Peterson.
Yeah, I would
I would
like to
love for
ask
both
him.
of us to talk to Jordan Peterson to all talk about this.
Yeah, right. Like, help me understand. But I've dug up everything I could find on that, because I wanted to see, is he just doing a poor job of communicating, or
Not
does he mean
likely.
what he's saying? They're right. Obviously, they've got the
Right?
master communicator. So no, he's not. He's got a broken belief. He really, when it comes to love,
Whoa.
he's got a broken belief. Like, in other words, he thinks that I would argue that he believes that love is not strong enough in and of itself, that love needs a monster to use when required. And so what I'm saying is
Well, okay, go
that
ahead.
is the epitome of weakness. Like the weakest men I've ever known in my life were these monsters like he's talking about.
Okay,
You know, that
so I agree with what you're saying about how generally the weakest men are monsters, and I think he would agree with that as well. And how the
yeah, he
weakest
says
men are
that too,
actually the
right.
most dangerous men and vicious men, right? But it's interesting what you said about how your thought is maybe, and the only way to really find this out is if to, to ask this question to him personally. But
Right.
if you're saying that maybe he thinks that love isn't enough and that you need a monster in case love isn't enough, to what extent could the quote, I guess, monster element? So I'm not talking about like being a monster and being vicious and evil with no regard for truth, but to what extent can the capacity for evil be embedded in love? Or maybe not the capacity for evil, but the capacity for destruction or harm or whatever. And I guess what I mean by that, and maybe I'm not using the right words, but by harm and destruction and stuff. But what I immediately think of is the wrath of God, because God loves us, but there's also a certain wrath that he has. And the Bible says, and I was just reading this with my girlfriend, that basically don't get revenge on your enemies, for God will deliver you and God will take care of it.
Yeah. Okay. So God's wrath is his love. God's not a monster. His wrath is his love. I mean, the reason that God has wrath is because he hates sin. The reason God hates sin is because he loves you. So
Yes.
God's wrath is for your sake. It's not for God's sake. In other words, God doesn't need wrath to protect himself.
Okay. Well,
God's wrath is for your sake. And what the
but then what
mistake
about
Peter's
like,
making, go ahead.
okay, okay, whoa, 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 we're getting into interesting territory here, because then I think about like, so, and this is very maybe controversial, but does that mean that if somebody goes to hell, that that is simply what's best for them?
Uh no, hell's not best for them. God, what else could God have done to make a way for you to escape hell? I mean, he sent all the prophets, we killed them. He sent Jesus, his son, gave us all the truth, gave him his word, we killed him. And then in the killing of him and in the crucifixion of Christ, God made a way for us to be delivered from our sin. Like he used all of that for our sake. Now,
Right.
I would argue that, and this may be a controversial statement, but I would argue that God doesn't send people to hell; they send themselves.
I do agree with that. I do agree with that. So when I think
It's
about that,
like,
I don't know why
I
I
mean,
exactly asked
shy
the
of,
question that I did.
yeah, God can't be love and control. He can't. I mean, if he just make a bunch of robots,
Then how,
you know, I
okay,
mean,
like I agree with you, and that's true. I guess then my next question is like, for example, because a lot of people they say like, well, the God of the Old Testament seems a lot more harsh, right? Like Sodom and Gomorrah. But then the explanation that I understand for something like that is, well, like there's always a way, and if there was
why did God
truly
do that?
something, well,
Yeah,
because
but why did God do that?
there was genuine evil and rejection of him that was causing harm and destruction.
Yeah, why does God
So,
not want us to reject him?
because if we reject him, it's not best for us, and it will cause destruction and harm others and harm ourselves and
Yeah, like
just branch out
us,
into even more
yeah,
chaos.
us rejecting God says nothing about God. Like God is not subject to us; we're subject to Him.
Yeah.
So God doesn't want us to reject us because he loves us. I mean, I'm sorry, he doesn't want us to reject him because he loves us.
Right,
And
right.
us loving him is best for us. God is the one being who is love, in which case it is best for us to love him, but it's best for us to love, period. So God's wrath is his love. And love has wrath. I'm not saying love doesn't have wrath.
See, and I think that's the thing, is I think then we get into a little bit of semantics where if you just isolate wrath, then
Oh,
it
it's not
sounds like not
semantics.
love. No?
It's wise. It's wise. That's the difference. So what I'm
It's
arguing, I
what?
may
It's
be
what?
wrong. It's the WHY. It's
Oh, the
not
why, the
semantics.
why.
It's the wise, right? So what I would argue that Peterson is saying is that you become the monster, and when you do, there's no longer any regard for your enemy. That's a monster. And then you think you're going to decide who you have regard for and who you don't have regard for. And now the monster is destroying itself. It's cutting itself off from God. God taught us to love our enemies. Now, if I love my enemy and my enemy insists on killing my family, I'm failing to love my family and my enemy by letting my enemy be a murderer
Right,
and allow my family to be killed. So
right.
if I but here's the difference. If I can paint a picture for you, if I love my enemy and I was forced to kill my enemy or harm my enemy after I have stopped them, if I can, I'll pick them up. I don't rejoice in their death or their suffering or their hurt. I'm broken by the fact that I had to do it. There's no monster in that at all. If I'm a monster, then I think I celebrate
Okay.
their
Then
death
I think the
and I hate my
question
enemy.
yeah, I think the question would be to define what he means by monster,
That's right. That's
right?
right.
That's
I
sort
agree
of the
with
crux
that.
of it.
I agree with that, but I've heard enough of what he's had to say that he's encouraging young men to become a monster, that they have to have a monster inside of them. And at the very least, he's communicating poorly. In that case, he's a master communicator, but in that case, he's encouraging young men to have a switch that you have to be capable of harming people. I'm not saying we don't have to be capable, but the reason I'm capable is not so that I can harm other people, it's so that I can protect.
Well, yes, exactly. And I think that he would very immediately agree with that.
Yeah, but when I protect, I don't hate my enemy. I mean, if I have to stop someone, it never has to be just for my family's sake. It's for their sake too. I'm not helping them by
Right. Okay.
enabling or allowing them to do selfish things.
Hmm.
So love. Well, I guess what I'm trying to say, Chris.
Also, just a heads up, we got a minute left after all
Okay,
this.
so we could wrap it like this: love is your offense and your defense.
Interesting.
There's no better. You have no better defense than love itself. You don't need monsters. That's my argument. And I wish Jordan, I'd love to talk to him about, maybe I talk to Jordan about
Well,
that sometime.
yeah, we can tag him. Um,
Yeah. But I don't
and
think he could defend that. But
well, I guess,
bold statement.
yeah, and I just think that if you're saying love is our offense and defense and we don't need monsters, then I would say that maybe what he's arguing is that there's a level of strength within love that accounts for the monster, which may be just poorly defined. Um,
Maybe.
that's
Maybe. I'd
sort of
like to hear
my
that.
that's my understanding or my interpretation of it or my thought. But I do agree that maybe using the term monster isn't, but
Yeah, the term doesn't bother me. What I think he's really saying is what's my question.
man, I would love to talk to Jordan Peterson about this and
Yeah,
really
yeah.
dig
Wouldn't
dig for the
everybody?
dig
Yeah,
for the truth about
yeah.
this.
Right.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you, Kenny. I appreciate